This week, we take stock of the history of women in Africa, how they've shaped conversations, communities, and nations across the continent. But we'll also look at the shape women themselves are in. This is a special edition of Our Voices. I'm Haydé FitzPatrick. Hello there.
And I'm Auriane Itangishaka. Thank you for joining us. We know that every issue is a women's issue. We spoke to some prominent women in African and global politics about how women have shown extraordinary leadership in the face of extraordinary odds. Join the conversation on social media. Find us here at VOA Our Voices. We'd like to hear from you throughout the whole conversation.
She's a fighter, and if you get in her way, you'll get kicked. That's a friendly warning from the woman who became Nigeria's first female finance minister. Now, I'm talking about none other than Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, or as she's been called, Okonjo-Wahala, meaning trouble woman. Well, those names don't bother her, she says. She has a list of credentials, probably as long as my arm, including managing director of the World Bank, and in 2018, she was appointed to Twitter's board of directors. Well, I met with her here in Washington to discuss all that trouble she's talking about and what women mean for nation building, economic prosperity, what they mean for young people and for other women.
I tell you business people in the audience, if you're not invested in Africa, then you will be missing one of the most important emerging opportunities in the world. Thank you.
Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala has a knack for making people listen. That's why Forbes and Time magazine listed her as one of the world's most powerful and influential people. A renowned economist, her thoughts and opinions are widely sought after. Even Twitter sent her a request to join its board. On the global stage, she's a veritable rock star, and other rock stars seem to agree. Okonjo-Iweala spoke to me about why she's telling the world to invest in Africa and why Africans themselves should do the same. What should, in your view, women in Africa, powerful women in Africa, do? And what can they do for poor women in Africa?
I think that you should use your position to advance women. And it took me some time to realize, because I've always been interested in how can I help, what can I do to materially change the position of women, even when I was at the World Bank, looking at it from a policy level. But when I was finance minister the first time, I think I was so concentrated on doing a good job professionally, doing the debt relief for my country that, cut out 30 billion in debt, all that I didn't really focus on, okay, how can I use this position of finance minister to really advance women? The second time around, I realized, my God, I have an instrument. Instead of talking about it and asking others, I can do something. I could do it because the President Goodluck Jonathan, there was very supportive of women. I said to him and to my colleagues, ministers that would volunteer to get additional results that would improve the lives of women, they will get extra budget. Mr. President, will you support me on that? He said yes. The Minister of Health wanted to do additional work that would benefit women suffering from fistula. He was able to get more resources to do that. Minister of Communication Technology wanted to help girls access more skills in school from technology, more budget. So I suddenly woke up, and just to give you one example, there was another program supporting women entrepreneurs. I just realized, just do it. Get the support. Use the place you are to advance women. Don't wait. Some of the best people to invest in on the continent are the women. Africans, and particularly African women, who against all odds have developed businesses, some of them world-class.
What would you say are the advantages for the rest of the world of doing business with the women of Africa?
African women are very entrepreneurial. So finding the specific programs and methods to support them, because it's not easy for them to access skills. It's not always about money, by the way. Sometimes they need the expertise and the skills, to get their business to the next level, to leave the small level and jump. And sometimes they're at the middle level, they want to jump to a bigger level. How do they do it? So getting them the advice on, some of them are very successful, but don't know how to manage success so they can really scale. So how do you get them that knowledge? And we thought that peer-to-peer, you could look at businesses, men and women who'd already succeeded in, and use them, you know, gather them together so they can form a kind of mentoring, you know, group for those who have not succeeded. Okay, access, the inevitable access to finance. When I was in government, there was a program called You Win, a youth enterprise with innovation. And the idea was people 40 and below, let's support them to register their businesses, give them the technical capacity, introduce them to banks. We took 2,000 entrants who had to write a business plan, by the way. And we noticed that women own 50% of enterprises, but only 17% of applications are women. Something is not right. We have to target women. So we did one program for women just to start. We saw some of them did not have computers access. There were many things and we solved them. We got 2,000 women. They were creating an average of 6 jobs per enterprise. So it can be done.
I have heard you talk about your optimism about young people and your faith that they will take the continent in the right direction. Where, in which countries and regions do you see a groundswell of next generation leaders ready to take the reins?
There is no country I've been to I've not met the most talented young people, men and women, you know, who are ready to lead. They are so well educated now. They are also so technology savvy. So they are not as left behind as they used to be. That's why I'm optimistic. But the question to them is, this leadership, I don't think from what I've seen in my life and career, someone is going to come and hand it to you. If you fall into it, they will even try to take it away from you if you're trying to really do something positive. Because there's still a lot of negative forces in leadership. It's not all, it's changing, and changing for the better. I see more and more countries where there are visionary leaders, but there are still many where the vision is not about the country or where it's going, but it's about self, it's about group, it's about tribe, it's about ethnicity. We have to rise above that, and it's the young people who can do it.
What would your advice be to the next generation of young leaders? What mistakes would you say they should not repeat?
I think they should not repeat the mistakes of, they should rise above self. And remember, our continent started with a lot of visionary leaders who fired us up in the 1960s and 70s, and we were so proud. And then something happened in between, and we lost it. Now it's about how Africa can be strong, integrated as a whole, and then, you know, sort of facing off against the world. How Africa can be strong, seizing the technology challenge, and saying we have bright young people who can even make this work for us. So that's what the advice I have for them. Don't go back to the narrow vision. Go to the big vision of what your country can be, and not just your country, but what the continent can be. If things don't work, you know, act. But act positively, not destructively. You need to act to make your country better. If there's a chance for democracy and you can vote, you know, young people talk a lot, but they don't go to vote, by the way, in country after country. So put your voice, any other form of activism that can leverage. And if you look at the people who are in these groups, there are a lot of women. So women are also saying, we want change.
Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, there, Nigeria's former finance minister, speaking to me in Washington. She also says change doesn't happen through passivity or complaints, but only through action.
After the break, I sit down with the former African Union ambassador to the United States, and we talk about the status of African women and how she sees the future of the continent.
Well, before we go there, we hit the streets of Nigeria to ask people which African women they most admire. Take a look.
I have two women who are, women of my choice. They are Okonjo-Iweala, who was Nigeria's former finance minister, as well as Ellen Sirleaf Johnson of Liberia. She was Liberia's president. They have a style of African culture, and which enhances their career as professionals.
Ibukun Awoshika, chairman, First Bank PLC. She has really achieved a lot. If you talk about what she's done in the banking sector, and other sectors, because this is the one who is very, very intelligent. She's very vast. She has a lot of experience when you talk about different sectors of the economy. She has contributed, she has given back to the society.
I'm Amanda Bennett, and I'm director of Voice of America. We've got some pretty interesting things going on. I'm recording this from home because here at Voice of America, almost all of us are now working remotely in order to help slow the spread of the coronavirus.
Voice of America, upholding our mission.
We at the Voice of America are taking COVID-19 very seriously. And for that reason, we're bringing you Africa 54 live from Esther's house.
Today and every day, we're here for you.
You're watching Our Voices. Welcome back. Dr. Chihombori-Quao is the former African Union ambassador to the United States. Her career as a Pan-Africanist has taken her throughout the continent and the world. She and I sat down recently to talk about the great strides Africa has made despite harsh colonial legacy and what she thinks are Africa's greatest challenges today. We are privileged to be welcomed in the home of the former African Union ambassador to the U.S., Dr. Arikana Chihombori-Quao. We will be discussing development, security, and the state of the African women. Welcome to the conversation.
IMF, World Bank, all other institutions, they make African countries jump through hoops. Loans will never be able to pay. The US, when they borrow money, they're getting it in 1.5, 1.9 interest rate. Africans, when they get the same amount of money, they're paying 9, 10%. The people who don't need a break, they get a break. The ones who need a break, they don't get a break. The sheer survival of the World Bank, IMF, is based on the fact that African countries and many other developing countries do not succeed. Their success is based on our failure. That has to change. And guess who can make that change? We, the children of Africa, we, the Africans, are the ones who have to say, we know your game now. Enough is enough. We're not playing it anymore. And this is where the diaspora come in. There are more Ghanaian doctors in New York City than in the entire country of Ghana. There are more Nigerian doctors in LA than in the entire country of Nigeria. So let's be serious here. What Africa needs is capacity, capacity, capacity. And that capacity is in the diaspora. So it behooves us to bring the diaspora together. Let them understand what is really going on in our Africa. Diaspora are not going home. Diaspora are angry about Africa because they are not understanding the root cause of why Africa is where it is today. They think getting rid of a president will take care of the problem. Far from it. That president is just going to be replaced by another one who is going to equally suffer from the same difficult environment to work in. So let's look at an Africa that must be free to take care of herself, an Africa that's free from exploitation from outsiders. The multinationals who are stealing from Africa every day in broad daylight. I use an example of the DRC. If you ever fly very low over the DRC, you'll see tarmacs in the jungle. You'll see 747s flying into DRC, picking up minerals and flying right out. The same multinationals are responsible for arming young people and giving them MK-16s. Because why? Their satellites in the skies are telling them where that village is. There are lots of diamonds. So what do? Arm young people, drag them up, and send them to go chop off a few heads. The rest of the village runs away, so they come behind and do their illegal mining. We black people must understand what is really going on. Because what we are shown instead is, oh, look at those Africans killing each other. There are some serious games that have been played in Africa for far too long. And once we understand that, we can strategize as to how we can begin to bring the difference and bring the change that Africa needs. And that change can only come if the African diaspora are united. And the Wakanda villages, as I call them, it is our organized way of saying, starting with one African diaspora center of excellence, it will be a new city, a developmental hub that we can then take from there. Every sector is developed. Take healthcare. How many doctors do we need in this region to take care of this many people? We pick up education, same thing. We pick up engineering. We pick up electricity. How many megawatts of power do we have in the region? How many do we need? Be it solar, be it wind, be it hydro, be it geothermal, be it nuclear.
I want to bring you back to West Africa. President Alassane Ouattara made a declaration that the franc CFA will be replaced with the ECO. But many will argue that because there's still foreign reserves being placed into French economy, It's just the same currency, different name.
Absolutely. I agree with that. The question I had right from the get-go, first, is pegged to the euro. Secondly, it's still going to be printed in France. Third, they may try to say we are eliminating the colonial tax, but they're replacing it with the foreign exchange tax. These countries are very capable of negotiating their own deals. Their funds don't have to go through the French central bank. Even countries wanting to trade with African countries, they don't have to go through French central bank. So there are all those technicalities that are just stupid. What's needed is complete separation. France has got to get out of Africa, really, honestly. Enough is enough. To take $500 billion out of Africa. I mean, it is insanity of the highest order. In countries that are supposedly poor, and making those countries fund French education, French healthcare system, create jobs for French youth while we are struggling in our country. It's no longer sustainable. President Macron needs to wake up and smell the coffee. And the African youth are the ones he's going to have to deal with. The African youth are not taking it anymore. They want what belongs to them. Financial institutions, them too. If I had my way, all the African heads of states should stop paying back any loans that were given by IMF and World Bank. Those loans have been paid gazillion times over.
Many people in the diaspora are wondering, yes, you're no longer the ambassador to the US, but they would like for you to take up the position of the African Union Commission.
I have to say, when the drumbeat was getting louder about me becoming the chairman of the African Union, I disregarded it because it's nothing that I've ever thought about. But increasingly, as we are looking at the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area, you have to understand the role of the African Union Commission is to be the implementer of the decisions that are agreed upon by the African heads of states. So it's important that we not get a career diplomat who's now only looking for their next position. We need somebody who can think outside the box. We need a business-minded person because people are dying, my dear young child. We've got to realize that children are dying every day. Women are dying every day. Millions of youth are unemployed, and we're too busy being diplomatic, not hitting the nail in the head. If we don't get an African Union chair who realizes that you're under the table and they're making you fight with your brothers and sisters as to who got the larger chunk of the crumbs under the table. That way, you never have to talk about what's on the table. That is a blind chair. We need somebody who gets it. I do know that there's a need for major disruption at the African Union level. If I were to become chair of the African Union, I want to bring disruption.
As we look at the African woman today, when we seek for crucial areas where she can be empowered and enabled, where should we focus? Should we focus in land right for economic freedom, or should we focus on them being in leadership positions for decision-making process?
First of all, in order for the African woman to move forward, it starts with the mind. Women in general, actually, we have a tendency to just apologize, and we just don't think we're quite able to get there. Granted, our challenges are real. Let's make a commitment to say we will succeed. Nobody is superior to us. We will get the job done. Let's find strength within each other that we are going to take care of ourselves. We're taking care of our neighborhoods, we're taking care of our homes, we're taking care of our Mother Africa. That commitment and that change of mindset, once we have the change of mindset, the game is over. Because you can take me wherever you take me. If my mind is in the right place, there's nothing you can do to me. There are no games you can play with me.
After the break, we continue our Women's Special Edition. You can keep talking to us on social media. Our handle is @VOA Our Voices, and tell us which African women you most admire. We also put that question to people on the streets of Nigeria. Here's what they had to say.
Okay, the African woman I admire is actually Chimamanda Adichie. I admire her for her prolific works in the literary world. In a short space of time, she has been able to release so much educated materials that have been groundbreaking in the literary world. These books have been, adapted into films. So it shows that she has been able to accomplish so much. We compare her today to the Achebes of our time.
The African woman that inspires me is Angelique Kidjo. She's from Cotonou. I love her so much. I love her songs because it brings joy to my heart and it talks about the African situation we are in. And I love the fact that she had a song with Burna Boy and she also won Grammy Award.
Wash your hands with soap and water before you eat, after using the toilet, after touching anything many other people touch, like a seat on a public bus. Scrub thoroughly for 20 seconds. If you cannot wash your hands, use a hand sanitizer. Taking these steps can prevent not only coronavirus, but also colds and flu and other viruses. For more information, visit the World Health Organization's website.
Welcome back. What happens when women lead? And what happens when they're left out and left behind? Well, I spoke to Melanne Verveer about that. She's the executive director of Georgetown University's Institute for Women, Peace and Security here in Washington. She also served as the first U.S. ambassador at large for global women's issues. I began by asking her how she thinks African women are faring compared to women in other parts of the world.
For decades, Melanne Verveer has championed women's advancement around the world, traveling to about 60 countries, speaking and listening to activists, politicians, academics, everyday leaders, and changemakers. So when I met her at Georgetown University in Washington, I was particularly interested in her take on the status of Africa's women.
Well, I do think that African women in many ways keep Africa going. They are very much cognizant of the future, very inner-directed. They understood violence against women was something that had to be addressed on the international level. The Nairobi UN conference put this issue on the Beijing conference agenda, and they brought this issue to bear as women's rights are human rights. And when the First Lady of the United States, who I was with at the time, got up to give one of the keynote addresses and gave this litany of violence against women, domestic violence, rape is a tool of war. She said, after each of these, this is a violation of human rights.
If there is one message that echoes forth from this conference, let it be that human rights are women's rights and women's rights are human rights once and for all.
It was something the African women truly understood before it became a part of international law, which finally happened through this evolution, but they put it on the agenda at the Nairobi conference. So when I look at African women, I see a lot of inequities, but I also see great strength and resilience. Women in some countries are the majority of the smallhold farmers, yet they do not have access to the same resources. They cannot be as productive, but as the studies tell us, if they have equal access, they not only will surpass significantly where they are today in productivity, but they will feed far more people in the world than we are feeding today.
Are there any places in Africa that you think serve as an example of the benefits of having women at peace negotiations? And what would you say is the cost of excluding women from peace talks?
When I look at the map of Africa today and look at the level of women's political participation, in those countries that have 30% or more women in their parliaments, a lot of that came out of the processes at the end of the conflicts where women were part of those efforts. And as a result, they are represented today in ways that they may not have been had those rights not been chiseled in constitutions, had they not been present in the nascent institutions, parliaments, justice systems, etc. Yes, women are victimized, and we've seen that victimization, whether it's been in Rwanda or whether it's happening today in South Sudan or the DRC, it goes on. But women are also agents of change, and they have so much to bring to this. And it's not that they've always been at the negotiations, but they have managed to persuade their leaders or to work together to get to a certain place where they can have influence.
What do you say to men who say, are you women trying to replace us? I've heard that so many times.
Well, and you know, it just is one or two women in a sea of hundreds of men, and that means they're going to replace us. Politics supposedly, when it works well, is supposed to address the needs of the people, is supposed to move a country forward, is supposed to be representative. And oftentimes, in this sea of men, they're making decisions for half the population with no representation from that population. Right. And when you can bring that representation in, you begin to see change. I looked at the experience of women at the local level in India because there was a recognition years ago by the leadership in that country that women had to be more representative in the political infrastructure, and that it wasn't going to happen quickly at the parliamentary level, but maybe it could happen at the local level. What do we know today? We know by virtue of the quota that was established, against all odds, they are viewed as one of the great revolutionary stories of democracy in India, because these poor women, many of them illiterate, representing the lowest level of governance across the country, are making decisions about education, making decisions about sanitation, making decisions about improving their community, largely issues that have been ignored by many of their predecessors. And, you know, in my own country, we didn't have anywhere near the numbers of women. We still are making it, but we're at 25% now since the last election. But even here, women have been the agenda setters on issues that didn't get the kind of recognition they deserved. Issues like we call Title IX, which is how do you get to ensure that women at the university level can compete in sports with the same resources the male students have. Mm-hmm. That opened our athletic field to women for achievement. So you can have the picture today of the United States coming back from Olympics with lots of medals around the necks of whom? Women athletes. So you need both men and women in politics. And I think because it's such a high power field, there is every effort made to keep the women from accessing that power.
Ambassador Verveer, thank you so much for your time and for sitting down with us.
It was wonderful. My pleasure.
And I'm Haydé FitzPatrick. Don't forget to appreciate the women in your lives, your communities, and your countries, just to be on the safe side. Until next time, it's goodbye.